Hello. We want to look at another important aspect in research called research ethics. Basically, the focus of this discussion is to understand certain norms that we are required to observe when we are undertaking research. It is therefore important that we understand these norms because their violation may lead to questions about credibility of our research findings and even sometimes litigation. I want therefore wish to welcome you to this area of discussion. In research ethics, we want to look at the meaning of research ethics. We will also look at why it is important for researchers and the research community to observe research ethics, and we'll conclude by having a candid discussion about the specific ethical norms or ethical principles that as researchers it is expected of us to observe. Welcome to this discussion. Let's begin by defining research ethics. And in this case, we want to start by looking at what is meant by ethics. Then we'll move to look at what is meant by research ethics. Ethics refers to the well-founded standards of what is right and wrong, as well as what humans ought to do to promote personal obligations, fairness, and virtues in society. The term ethics is also understood as norms and standards that guide decision making about morally correct courses of human action. Others look at research ethics as norms for conduct that distinguish between acceptable and unacceptable behavior. Basically, when you look at these three definitions of the concept, what comes out clearly is that ethics are about standards. Standards that define what is right and what is wrong, or standards that define what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. So basically, when you talk about ethics, we are basically looking at standards that have been put forward by society to guide our conduct in terms of coming up with judgment with regard to what we need to do, so that what we do ought to be guided by what we judge as being right or wrong. But ethics goes further to help also in inculcating values in people so that we feel obligated as individuals, as groups, to do things fairly and in virtuous manner. What then is research ethics? The concept of research ethics refers to values, norms, and institutional arrangements that regulate scientific activities. Research ethics has also been understood to mean principles concerned with the protection of the rights, dignity, and welfare of research participants. The guidelines apply to all public and private research and all types of research, whether it is basic, applied, or research that have been commissioned by certain agencies. Research ethics also govern the activities at consulting firms when undertaking research-related assignments. In short, when you talk about research ethics, basically we are looking at the regulations that have been put forward by the scientific community to ensure that as we undertake research, we respect, protect the rights and dignity of individuals or subjects that we are engaging in our research. And the ethics that I'm talking about, they guide both individuals that are taking research. For instance, if I'm taking research as an individual, I'm guided by these ethics. If it is an institution, say a university, taking research as an institution, they are also bound to observe both those research ethics. If it is a public institution, such as a government agency, they are also bound to observe the research ethics. Even if it is a private institution, such as a corporate body, they too are required to ensure that while undertaking the research, they protect the rights, the dignity, as well as the welfare of the research participants. Research ethics expects researchers to set higher standards of conduct and to enforce a higher level of discipline while undertaking research. It is also important for researchers to consider the consequences of unethical conduct on their integrity, reputation, as well as career. Thus, the scientific community have developed a set of ethical standards to guide researchers in the course of their work. Research ethics, therefore, generally identify factors or issues that researchers should take into account while undertaking research. If we take a moment and reflect on what I have so far said, what it means is that research ethics is meant to offer both moral and legal direction to researchers. There are the things that it contains the do's and don'ts of what researchers should do and what researchers should not do. And they are quite broad, as we are going to look at them one by one shortly. Again, when you look at all these things, it is incumbent upon researchers, whether at individual level or institutional level, to know that certain unethical conduct can adversely affect their integrity as institutions, the integrity as individuals, as well as the integrity of the research findings. Again, it can also affect their reputation to an institution or a reputation to the scientist. Above all, if we engage in an ethical conduct, then again, it may also have adverse effects on our career. We may lose jobs, we may be taken to court, and the public and the scientific community, our peers, can raise doubts about our suitability as researchers. So it is important that all these issues are looked at carefully to avoid instances where our reputation, integrity, and career come to be questioned. Research ethics can be divided into 4 different types. One are those norms or ethical issues that constitute good scientific practice, and they include those relating to academic freedom, originality, openness, and trustworthiness. Then we have another group of ethical issues which relate to norms that regulate the research community, such as those dealing with integrity, accountability, impartiality, as well as criticism in research. The third set of ethical norms are those that regulate relationship between researchers and participants, such as respect, human dignity, confidentiality, free and informed consent. Then the last set of ethical issues are those that are concerned with the relationship between researchers, such as independence, conflict of interest, social responsibility, as well as dissemination of research findings. These are the broader typologies of research ethics. In the subsequent discussions, we want to look at the specific ethical issues or principles that researchers are required to observe when conducting their research. Why is it important for us or for researchers to observe ethics in research or research ethics? One of them is to do with credibility. It is believed that researchers who fail to observe appropriate ethical principles may experience doubt about the integrity and credibility of their study findings. These may have adverse effects on their career and overall integrity as researchers and scholars. Ethical practice, thus, is seen as a means of cultivating trust, which helps in strengthening integrity of researchers as well as the credibility of their study findings. What, in short, we mean here is that credibility of study findings and researchers is enhanced in cases where researchers and research in general observe appropriate research ethics, because in doing so, it enhances the belief that what has been researched on and the findings that are valuable are those that were done when all scientific procedures and principles were observed. The other importance of observing research ethics is to do with reputation. The reputation of a research institution in the community and among other institutions, and even donors who support them in terms of their research endeavors, is important, and the continuity and success of such continuity of funding and the success of such institutions depends partly on the ability and stand with regard to observation of research ethics. And ethical behaviors can drive away or discourage potential respondents and sponsors, leading to institutional decline. So that if an institution or certain individuals are known not to observe the required research ethics, it can make respondents, it can make donors shy away from associating with such research institutions. Institutions that observe and practice good ethics face less doubt about study findings and litigations from aggrieved parties. Indeed, it should be noted that if certain ethical principles are not observed, and by failure to observe such ethical principles leads to social, psychological, or physical injuries to participants or respondents, then the respondents have the liberty to seek legal redress in courts. If that were to happen, indeed, it will create a bad reputation and doubts about the ability of such an institution to undertake researches in an ethical and acceptable manner. It is important thus for institutions to ensure that all the laid down ethical principles are observed without disregard to any. Therefore, ethical practice not only gives an institution a good reputation, but also saves it from lawsuits and fines. It should be noted here that if certain injuries, be it social, psychological, or physical injuries, are experienced by participants or subjects in any study, then they may have the liberty to go to court to get compensation. So such compensation could lead to financial loss in addition to a bad reputation being labeled on such institutions. So reputation is important. If you observe the right ethical principles and practices, your reputation is held up. If you fail to observe them, then your reputation is eroded. Another reason why it is important for researchers to adhere to research ethics is for moral values. It should be noted that ethical lapses in research can lead to significant harm to humans, animals, the public, and society in general. It's in this regard that governments and institutions have put in place policies on research misconduct, conflicts of interest, human and animal subjects, to ensure that accountability is borne by researchers. Indeed, violation of fundamental ethical norms do attract punishments. These punishments may include prosecutions in courts of law, withdrawal of an academic award, as well as termination of research funding. Ethical norms, therefore, are meant to promote moral as well as social values such as social responsibility, human rights, animal welfare, compliance with the relevant laws, and public health and safety. Quite clearly, from here, it is evident that adherence to research principles and research ethics can act as an important preventive measure against harm and damage to society. It is therefore important for researchers at all levels to ensure that they observe basic research principles, as doing so is not only going to improve their reputation, to improve their integrity, but will also go a long way in safeguarding human and animal life, as well as preventing psychosocial harm that may occur in society. Let us now look at each of these ethical principles, what they are, and how they apply to research. One of the principles that researchers are required to observe is honesty. Honesty refers to fairness and straightforwardness of conduct, or adherence to the facts as they are. This principle demands of researchers not to fabricate, falsify, or obtain data from sources that are discussed as authentic. The researcher should ensure that data and information are obtained from authentic sources and with the necessary approval and consent of the respondents. Again, data from primary and secondary sources should be reported as they are, without any fabrication or manipulation to suit certain ends. Where necessary, a researcher should acknowledge the original authors of literature through appropriate citations and referencing. This is important. It is necessary for researchers to ensure that any idea they have used to enhance the understanding of their research and which is not originally theirs, such ideas are acknowledged by citing the authors of those particular original sources. This is important. We are required as researchers at all times to ensure that we are straightforward, we are truthful, and we observe fairness when we are undertaking research. any information that is established to have been fabricated or falsified is normally punishable by a rejection of the research report. And in that case, if it was a study that was meant to lead for an award of an advanced degree, that research will be cancelled and the concerned student will forfeit the degree that he or she was pursuing. Another important ethical value that researchers are required to observe is the duty to inform. Researchers must provide participants with adequate information about the field of research, the purpose of research, as well as the source of funding. Further, participants should also be provided with information about who will receive access to the information, the intended use of the results, and the consequences of participation in the research project. However, the type of information provided may be influenced by the nature of research. Of course, we know we have field studies, experimental studies, or online-based studies. These three types of research may require researchers to provide certain information to the participants, and in some cases, certain information may not be provided. Otherwise, overall, what is key in terms of the duty to inform is to ensure that researchers make their participants aware what the study is about, as well as the consequences for participation in that particular study. It is the duty of researchers to inform the participants what their role in the study would be, so that participants are required to engage in the study from a point of knowledge rather than ignorance. Information should be provided in a neutral manner so as to avoid putting participants under undue pressure. Indeed, participation in any study, research, is voluntary, and therefore the way researchers inform their participants should be done in a way that does not in any way appear to be pressurizing the participants to engage in the study. We need to be neutral and we need to be objective even as we inform the participants about the study, and also even as we persuade them to participate in the study. Persuasion should not involve any form of financial or other favors. It should be simply appealing to the conscience of the participants to engage in the study. Informed consent is also another important ethical principle that research. This ethical principle is important because research, the success of any data collection depends on the goodwill of the participants. And one way of winning the goodwill of participants is to ensure that you adequately explain to them what the study is about, so that you appeal to them to participate in the study. They need to participate in the study from a point of knowledge. You must also explain to them the dangers they are likely to suffer by engaging in the study, as well as the benefits they stand to gain when they participate in the study. Of course, benefits here does not necessarily mean financial benefits, but it means the fact that the outcome of the study will be shared with them, so that they are also aware of what is happening in society with regard to the issues that were under inquiry. This is an important ethical principle. Indeed, if a researcher was to undertake a study without adequately seeking the permission of the participants, and then later on, participants argued that they were not aware that they were being the study was conducted without their consent, they can go to court and seek legal redress. This might lead to nullification of the study findings by the respective academic institution, or imposition of fines and other forms of punishments meted on the researcher. So informed consent is an important ethical principle that all researchers should endeavor to observe. Steps are required to comply. Consent occurs when a person voluntarily agrees to the proposal or desire of another. The principle of informed consent requires that participants in the study are fully aware that they are taking part in the study. The researcher is required to explain to the participants the purpose of the study, the methods of data collection, and the possible study outcome. This is done as a way of making them aware of the study before seeking their permission for participation in the study. This principle also requires that participants take part in the study without coercion, deception, or inducement. It is important also to note that even as we seek informed consent, there are certain categories of participants who may cognitively not be in a position to consciously understand or accept their participation in the study, and therefore they fall under what we call impaired or absent capacity category. They include children and the mentally ill. Others could be persons with intellectual disabilities, persons suffering from dementia, and those who are intoxicated, either through drugs or alcohol. Therefore, they are not in the right mental state at the time when a study is being undertaken to consciously engage in the study. Therefore, individuals who are able to give informed consent should be included only when it can be shown that the research has immense benefit to them. Otherwise, if it is not possible, or rather if it is possible for the researcher to obtain information elsewhere, and you still use the findings to explain what could have happened to that particular group of subjects, then it's advisable that a researcher obtains information from individuals that can consciously participate in the study. The researcher must also demonstrate that risks and strain associated with the study are negligible. Indeed, there are certain studies that may have certain risks, and therefore such studies, it is important that researchers carefully weigh in and ensure that the risk exposure participants is minimal. We don't want studies to leave a trail of psychosocial and even physical destruction on participants. We want studies to be those that are good and those that are beneficial both to the researcher, to the participants, as well as the broader society. So this one is also an issue that researchers must rather are duty bound to ensure that persons that may not have the intellectual ability to consciously consent to the study are brought under appropriate consideration, and where possible, they should be avoided or excluded in the study if there are other participants that information can be collected on their behalf. Although it's expected of researchers to obtain the consent of participants, there are some times when a research can still go on without the consent of participants, and therefore the consent of participants may not be required under certain situations. For instance, when the researcher does not imply direct contact with the participants. Consent may also not be required in cases where the data being processed is not particularly sensitive. There are certain data that are general, and therefore they are not injurious in any way to the participant. If that is the focus of the study, then it is sometimes possible that such studies may proceed on without the consent of participants. Again, consent may be waived where the utility value of the research exceeds any disadvantage for the individual's involvement in such as national census. Remember, for instance, most countries that have functional governments, such as Kenya, carry out national population census after every 10 years. Indeed, the census is an important exercise because it not only tells the country, the government, the number of people living in that country, but it also gives a clear indication of other of the areas that may require developmental priorities. So census is an important exercise, and if there are other studies that are considered to be so much important to the extent that individual consent is not that outweighs the individual consent, then such studies may be allowed to proceed on without the consent of the participants. Again, consent is not required when it is when it's not feasible to obtain consent from all of the participants, such as when using registry data. If, for instance, we want to use data on death or data on birth, such registry data, of course, that information represents human beings, but sometimes it can be a Herculean task to trace each and every person whose data is stored in the treasury and seek their opinion. In such cases, we may be allowed as researchers to proceed on and use such data without the consent of the person whose information is obtained, is contained in the registry. However, even as we use that data, the data should not be used in a manner that may turn out to be injurious to the person whose information is contained in this registry. Confidentiality is yet another important ethical principle that researchers are required to observe. This is an ethical principle that places restrictions on certain types of information to be revealed to unauthorized parties. In research, confidential information includes private data pertaining to human subjects, personnel records, and even personal information. It is required of researchers to ensure that the clients and participants that the information obtained from them will not be used for any purpose other than that of the study. The researcher must also not reveal to unauthorized parties the identity of participants and information provided. In this case, participants are allowed not to reveal their names and other personal data if they feel that the revelation of such personal information may disadvantage them in one way or the other. For other times, participants may be allowed to use pseudonyms, names that do not directly represent them. For instance, we can call somebody person X, person Y, or participant A, participant X. In that way, we are concealing their identity. This is an effort to ensure that the information obtained from them is not unfairly released to parties that are not authorized to access such important information. So in studies, rather in research, confidentiality is an important element. Information obtained from participants should not be used to criminalize or to injure or against participants, and even so that at all times we need to seek the permission of the participants, whether they are willing to have their real identities exposed to the public or concealed. If they choose that they want their the information about them concealed, then the researcher must go ahead and put all measures necessary to ensure that the information, the identity of the participants is not revealed to the public. So confidentiality is, again, a very, very critical principle that researchers must observe at all times. Another important principle that we are required to observe is plagiarism. That to do with plagiarism. Plagiarism refers to using someone else's ideas and presenting it as one's own without correctly citing their sources. The most form of plagiarism is pure duplication, with others being, for example, the use of other scholars' ideas without acknowledgement. Plagiarism violates the duty of truthfulness and originality, and researchers who build on the work of others must cite their sources. Plagiarism also undermines researchers' reputation and credibility of study findings. Hence, researchers and institutions must take steps to prevent plagiarism. It is indeed illegal under the Copyright Act in many jurisdictions for someone to use other people's ideas without appropriately acknowledging them. You don't profit from other people's ideas without acknowledging them. That is an offense in many jurisdictions under the Copyright Act. Plagiarism is not only prohibited in academic work, but is also prohibited in artistry. For instance, music. You can't copy somebody else's music and present it as yours. If there are certain words or tunes you have borrowed from other people, from other musicians, it is only right that you acknowledge as such. Same thing to academic work. If you have used other people's ideas to build onto yours, to enhance the understanding of the work that you want to do, then you are duty bound, the researcher, to say who those people are, what their work was about, when their work was done, and the findings of their work. Of course, different institutions have different guidelines on how work should be cited. In many countries, including Kenya universities, the most used citation guideline is that is provided by American Psychological Association, in bracket APA. It is the one that is mostly encouraged, especially in social sciences. So students, you need to take time and download and peruse this particular guideline so that anytime you are called upon to write academic papers, then you will use that as a guideline on how well to quote, cite, as well as reference your work. The other principle that is also of great value to research is that the one that deals with data handling and storage. This principle relates to the data storage and handling as the practices and policies related to recording, storing, auditing, archiving, analyzing, interpreting, sharing, and publishing data. Ethical handling of research data requires not only acting according to ethical principles, but also learning about the policies, resources, procedures, and practices that contribute to the collection, analysis, sharing, as well as preservation of data. All data should be treated as confidential, to be published and accessed only by the researcher and other authorized research team members. The research findings should be reported accurately and supported by adequate primary and secondary data. Basically, when we talk about data handling and storage, we are simply saying that how we are simply concerned about how you manage data once data has been collected. How do you report data? Report data exactly the way it was given. Even if you give an interpretation or you make inferences on the information you have been provided, it is always important to ensure that the interpretation does not in any way misreport what the respondent has given. Otherwise, the respondent can accuse you of accurately capturing their views and opinions. That is, those are some of the ethical principles that researchers are required to observe. Indeed, there could be others, but the ones we have covered here, the ones we have discussed here, are some of the most prominent and most used ethical principles that researchers are encouraged to observe and practice. Once more, kindly note down an issue that is not clear so that we may create time and have a more thorough discussion on them. Otherwise, I want to thank all of you for once more taking your time and listening to me. Thank you so much.